Hi guys, so today's video is going to be my March wrap-up. Really quick, just a little update as to how things have been affecting my family. If you don't care about this part, I'll have a timestamp for me. You can just skip to me talking about the books. But I would love to know how everything's going for all of you. Are you guys doing okay? For me and my family, we are doing definitely okay. My husband works for a grocery store, so he's been a little bit stressed, but he still can work, which we're very grateful for. I have had to stop teaching, but I'm doing this and I do make some money doing this. And so I'm really grateful that my husband and I are in a position where we're okay. And I also feel very grateful for the fact that I'm able to help my dad right now. For those of you that haven't watched my vlogs or maybe you just don't know, my dad is old to have a daughter my age. I'm 27. He's 73, gonna be 74 this year. And he has had pneumonia. So we didn't know initially. He called me one day, my birthday actually, on the 19th. He called me and he was like, hey, can you come take me to the doctor? And I was like, yes, I'll be there as soon as I can. So he got some medicine. The medicine was for a week. After the week was up, then he called me again. He's like, can you take me back to the doctor? I don't feel better. After his antibiotics were done, he went right back to feeling not very good again. And then I was really stressed out because I was like, oh my gosh, does he have the thing right now? And like, does that mean I'm going to have to go into quarantine? Does that mean my husband can't work because he'll have to go to quarantine? And I was a little stressed, but luckily they were like, yeah, it just looks like you need a different prescription. So a different antibiotic. So they got him a different antibiotic. He's doing much better as of right now. Fingers crossed that he continues to improve. He is definitely one of those kinds of people that when you tell him, hey, you need to relax, that means to him, oh, I'll just like vacuum and mop and like I'll water my plant. Like he doesn't actually know how to relax. He's doing much better. I am going to visit him again soon. But the reason I'm telling you all of this, first off, I really hope and I'm praying for the well-being of the world right now. But also, there were a few times, there's those 2 times I just drove out to my dad's and my whole day went out the window. There's one day he came to my house. I grocery shopped for him too one day. Anyway, what I'm getting at is I actually did get a lot of reading in, but that's my excuse for why I have not finished some of the books that I have started. There's like 4 or 5 books that I've started that I haven't finished yet. I apologize for that. I know none of you really care, but one of those books happens to be Dead House Gates, and I have time and time again had a reason for not having finished this book despite wanting to have picked it up for months now. So I have tabbed it all up. I'm going to be reading a little bit every single day. The other books that I have started, we have Heart of Flames by Nikki Powell Preto. She is thick. She's a chunky girl, and I'm really enjoying this sequel so far. I am really excited to see this world open up even more. We follow a group of rebels who are Phoenix riders, so there's phoenixes in this series, and I feel like that's awesome. I love mythological creatures. I've also started Woven in Moonlight. I'm like 30 pages in, so I can't really say much about it, except for that it's Bolivian-inspired fantasy, which is really cool. I've never read anything like that before. And right now, we're just kind of seeing this group of almost like refugees who are trying to hold it together. And we have a girl who is pretending to be their leader when the real royal who's supposed to be leading them is kind of like in disguise. And so we have this decoy set up. I've also started The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern and My Poor Husband. This is the buddy read book from March. And when we read these buddy read books, we both read them, but we're not allowed to talk to each other about them until we're done. And then we talk to each other via a podcast style chat video where you guys can hear us finally find out the other person's thoughts. Poor Sean, he really wants to talk to me about this book, and I'm like, sorry. I have not read really enough yet, though. Right now, I just think we're kind of getting everything set up. But I also have high hopes for this one because I've heard it's really beautiful and very whimsical. Let's get into some books I've actually finished now. First up, we have Night of the Dragon. This is the 3rd book in the Shadow of the Fox trilogy by Julie Kagawa. Oh man, I really liked this conclusion. It was basically like boss battles the whole time. This whole last book was basically, all right, things are about to go down, and then things started to go down, and then it was just things going down for the rest of the book. That's a really great description, guys. I am really good with words. I did a whole trilogy review for those of you who haven't read any of the books in the series are unfamiliar with it. A very brief setup for the story is we follow these two main characters, Tatsumi and Yumeko. Yumeko is this sweet half kitsune girl who is very naive and innocent. And then Tatsumi is from a shadow clan and he has to guard / use this sword that has the ability to possibly possess him if he lets his emotions get too high, and so he's constantly shutting out his emotions, and the two of them get paired together to try and stop bad people from using this wish that comes every 1,000 years. That's the setup. But this third one I really liked this third one so much. I liked how things progressed in the story, and man, the ending was just so freaking emotional. A book that was not emotional at all, it was pure entertainment, was The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. So a little bit ago, I had checked out the book Spell Hacker from my local library, and I was like, I need to get back to that book. So I was checking it out, and I was like, man, I don't know, I'm just not feeling this right now. So I've technically DNF'd that book, not because I think it was bad. I just wasn't clicking with it, and I wanted to make sure I didn't fall into a reading slump or anything. So that's why I picked up this one, because the premise sounded so ridiculous that I thought it would be a great time. It's this girl who is described as a Slytherin story. The character, her goal is to seduce the king, get him to marry her so that she can kill him and take all his power. But there are other people that want him dead too, so now she's having to navigate politics and scheme and whatnot to keep the king alive long enough so that she can seduce him, have him marry her, and then she can kill him. I was like, that sounds hilarious. And I was a little nervous because I was like, I hope it's not one of these, like, this is her plan, but she's really justified in feeling this way because she has reasons. And she really doesn't. It's basically just she's selfish and she wants power and she is really manipulative, and it was super entertaining. It was crazy entertaining. I had a good time with it. Wasn't anything that it's like I'm going to be thinking about this book for years and years or anything. Didn't impact me. But if you just need a quick standalone that's entertaining, that's exactly what this is. I do want to say really quick though, given the nature of the setup, the whole concept of like, I'm going to seduce him, it's not an explicit book by any means, but there are some mature themes in the story. Our main character is she's a bit like, she's like a gold digger, right? And she's honed those skills. Next up, we have Scavenge the Stars by Tara Sim. This is a Count of Monte Cristo retelling. I have never read Count of Monte Cristo. I'm familiar with it, but I unfortunately can't necessarily give you a really good side-by-side differences, similarities, things like that. But I don't know if you would like it more or less if you've read the original, because there are some differences about this. It's very sea-centered. The ocean plays a big role in one of our characters' lives. She was sold onto this to serve on this ship for 7 years, basically as a slave. And when her 7 years are up, she wants revenge. But the thing that makes this different, one of the biggest things that I can tell is different from this and the original, is that the antagonist, it's not really this really personal revenge story. She has one person that she was directly involved with, but otherwise the people that she wants revenge against are kind of people that led to this being a thing in their society. So she doesn't really know them. It's not that personal. It's more like, oh, this crime boss is the reason for why I was in this situation for years, so I'm going to go get that guy. But she doesn't really know him. She hasn't interacted with the antagonist. There's multiple antagonists. And also, it's a multiple point of view story with her and then a character named Ko. Ko's actually the son of one of the people she's trying to get revenge on. I thought that was interesting. I do think this story, there were a few times I tabbed it because Ko struggles with addiction and gambling, and then Amaya is kind of, she's been traumatized by what she's had to go through, and I thought that those things were explored quite well. But overall, I just didn't quite click with it the way I was wanting. But if it sounds up your alley, I would definitely recommend it. Next up, we have Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. I don't currently have this. I checked it out from the library. I never thought I would say this, but I really did not like this book. I love Sanderson. I've read so much Sanderson, and I pretty much loved everything that he's written, and I was so confused when I read that book because I really didn't like it. It's a cool setup and a very strong beginning. I thought the beginning definitely pulled you in immediately, so I liked that about it. The setup is basically there are superhero type individuals in their world, but they're all evil. And so it's our world, but they're trying to live where these individuals are now ruling, and they're awful and terrible, and the stakes right away are so high. The goal of our main character is to try and take out one of these individuals who are known as epics, and man, does it set you up with like, oh, such an underdog story. There's no possible way they can take out this person. They're just basically all powerful. So the setup was great, very fast-paced, but I'm not going to get into it. I have a super long review about why I personally didn't like it. If you are wanting to check out Sanderson, some people will tell you this is a great one to start with, and you can decide for yourself, of course. I just would never recommend. I would never recommend this be where you start with Sanderson. If you want to be a completionist and read everything by him, or if you just think the premise sounds cool, you want a fast-paced story, then yeah, definitely check it out. But man, so many other, Mistborn, Warbreaker, Rhythmatist, Skyward, so many other ones that I would say like, oh, start with these. Or if you just want to dive into it, go into Stormlight. But I didn't, I'm sorry guys, I didn't like it at all. Getting into a book that I loved. I loved this book. It is an absolute new favorite. I have never almost cried so many times reading a book, and that would be The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. This is a story about, I'm going to say Mozart's sister, who technically is also a Mozart because that's their last name, but I'm just going to say Mozart's sister. Most people don't even know that Mozart had a sister, and most people don't know that she was possibly just as talented, if not more talented, than her brother. But at that time in history, women being musicians, it just really wasn't an option for them unless they were children. And so in this story, her father, he has the two of them as two children constantly touring Europe to show their abilities. And for his daughter, she starts to recognize from a very young age that her worth to her family, to her father, is only until she turns 18, because that's when she becomes a woman. That's when she'll have to become somebody's wife and a mother and fulfill her role as a female. And even though we're talking about things that have to do with her being a girl, this is not a story that's like men are evil and feminism. It's not that kind of a story. It's a story about somebody who has been forgotten in history, somebody who was not even really recognized in their time because of something in their society. Oh man, I majored in music, and I actually thought I wasn't gonna like this book. I was afraid that I was gonna end up being overly critical of it because I don't usually even like music-centered books. But this one, oh man, right away, when she's a child, she has this wish, like, she doesn't want to be forgotten. And I'm like, but you end up forgotten, because I majored in music, and I'm like, briefly in music history class, it was like, oh yeah, and then also he had a sister, and that was about it. And I just knew for so much of the story, I'm like, nobody knows, nobody even really realizes that you existed, and it just broke my stupid little heart. Oh my gosh. Now, the reason I didn't think I was actually gonna like this was because it's very heavy in the magical realism thing. I don't really like magical realism. I usually just want fantasy, or I want historical fiction. I don't like this in between, but it so worked for me in the story. I didn't realize that Mozart and his sister literally came up with a magical world called the Kingdom of Back. It was kind of how they entertained themselves when they were constantly in these carriage rides going from one country to the next. And I didn't know that, but Marie Lu took that concept, and then she kind of made this magical realism thing where it almost feels like a real part of their lives. If you've ever needed to read a book about something sad and how like the world is unfair to some people, that's this book. I'm going to be doing some recent wrap-ups in the month of April because I have some other books that I want to talk about a little bit more in depth than I'll get to in a monthly wrap-up, or at the very least that I don't know that I'll have time to do an entire dedicated review for. So I actually did record that already for this book. I do talk about it a little bit more, but even with that, I might end up doing an entire video for it, and it might end up being like a half an hour long or something, because that book. Next up, we have Nameless Queen by Rebecca McLaughlin. And this is a caste system society where we have 3 classes. We have royals, legals, and nameless. And our main character is a nameless who, through some crazy situation that she doesn't understand, she has been named the next queen. And so she's a street rat. She's kind of a nobody. She has nothing. She's poor and uneducated. And all of a sudden, she is thrust into the political realm. She's trying to figure out what the heck she's doing. And it was not anything new. I wouldn't say it brought anything really unique to the fantasy genre, but it's a standalone. There was no romance, which was kind of refreshing. There was some really lovely friendships and familial relationships in this story, which I really liked. And I just felt like it was kind of wholesome. It was kind of a wholesome story. I think that while I didn't absolutely love this book, it's one of those that I've thought about. I want to keep it just so that when my nieces are older, they can read it. It's commentary on, one, the way that society kind of groups people based off of their socioeconomic status. There's commentary that's not like pushing an agenda or anything. It's just like, yeah, sometimes people don't really think that poor people matter. And then also, I felt like the main character, kind of a pessimist, and she has a friend who's very optimistic, and she just thinks like, I wish I was like that. I wish I was like that. And I tabbed up this one part where this particular friend is like, I have to work at this. It's not like the world is just happy and great for me because I'm just naturally like this. I have to look for the good in the world. I have to look for the good in people. I don't know. There was just some things about this book that I really liked. It was sweet. It was a good, like from start to finish, it was a good conclusion, pacing, all that kind of stuff. It was just a good standalone. It, again, wasn't anything brand new, super unique, anything like that, but it's a good fantasy standalone. I think it's a great entry into the genre, especially for younger readers. I also read Ever the Brave, and this is the sequel to Ever the Hunted, which is a story following a girl named Britta who has been assigned to find her father's killer, who the kingdom believes was actually her childhood best friend. And that particular story, the sequel, it was almost frustrating because the romance side of the story, I do think this is more of a half romance, half fantasy story. I usually like stories to be a little more fantasy than romance, but I thought the romance was great in this story. It was sweet. I thought that it was fairly realistic and that the characters would get frustrated or they would say something comes across a certain way and the other one would get mad, but then they would talk it through and then they would move on. They acted like real people and they had respect for one another and they were really cute. I really liked the romance. However, in the second one, the reason I say I was kind of frustrated is because there's like a love triangle in the second one that I just thought was kind of unnecessary. And the second one had, I just feel like because the romance was a bigger part of the story, the antagonist didn't have a lot of depth. They were kind of an in-the-distance type of antagonist. And there were some just scenes in the book that were a little cliche. The romance really is very sweet. I really liked the romance, and I liked the writing a lot. I would absolutely read something else by this author. But for me personally, the romance being so sweet wasn't enough for me to say, like, I loved this book. I think maybe if the series had been longer or if it had been a standalone, I think a duology just wasn't. I would have either liked the world to be explored more, the antagonist to be explored more, or I would have liked it to be more of just like a love story in a fantasy world. But if you really like romance and you don't want a bunch of fantasy stuff, this is probably the duology for you. Next, we have All the Stars and Teeth. And you know what? This book was super fun. It's a story where our main character is the heir to the throne. She has to prove that she deserves this position by performing and showing off her soul magic, which is super dark, and things go terribly wrong. And then now she has to kind of go on this mission, and she's discovering more about her kingdom. She's realizing that things are not as they seem. And it's a set of islands, each island having one primary type of magic that is used. The soul magic can only be used by her family, but the other islands have they have restoration magic, they have elemental magic, they have time magic. It's really interesting. The magic system has both a combination of things that are familiar and then its own unique spin, and I really liked that. The story, it's a traveling story, but I never felt like things were thrown in there and unnecessary, and it involves a lot to do with the ocean. The descriptions in this book are super lush and vivid, and I really liked them, like vibrant. They were vibrant and colorful and cool. I had a really good time. Just like with Kingdom of Back, I have recorded more in-depth thoughts for this, and I think this could have a lot of potential to become a very popular series for a lot of people. If you like anything to do with the ocean and mermaids and sea creatures, that one, that's the book for you. I had meant to finish up the Grisha trilogy also this last month, and I meant to read a book by Joe Abercrombie. Our library is closed, so I was gonna be picking up Best Served Cold, but the library, I can't get it from there now. So I went ahead and downloaded the audiobook for it, and I just went ahead and bought the Kindle version of it. So I will be starting that, and then the Grisha trilogy, it's a reread for me, so I'm not really in a hurry to finish it, but I will be finishing that one soon. Finally, done talking about all of these books. Let me know what you got around to in March. Let me know if you had any new favorites, if you read any of these books, but I hope you guys are all staying healthy. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.